back from the shop, and yep. So this is a continuation of that conversation. Just give me a second. Merging onto the highway here. So, yeah, so, we were talking about the ABOs and Pan-Africans, just addressing some of the feedback that I get from them often. Okay. And back to the ABOs, and some of the feedback that I get from y'all. Some of you guys need to get a grip on reality, because you need to question what your motivation is in your actions, in your walk of this indigenous path, okay? And what I'm noticing is that some of y'all, your motives are not right, okay? And like I said before, if you don't have culture, no one's gonna take you seriously, okay? And as I said before, like some of the feedback that I get and just some of the non-viewership when I do shows dealing with culture, okay? And you're not gonna get too far in this if you can't do things like, as I said before, somebody grilling you on what your culture is, what your language is, what your dances are, and things of that nature. It's not enough to just say, oh, yeah, we do, whatever the latest dance we do in the hood is, or we go to church, and we shout, and do this, that, and the other. Okay, that's not culture. Those are survivals. Okay, it's not the same as an actual laid out practice from start to finish with all of its components. Okay, those are just fragments or survivals of something that was. Okay, it's a lot different. You can't do that, y'all. Some of y'all, your sole motivation for being in this here is just to say, oh, I'm not African. And I've heard people say that, I don't know nothing about the culture, but, all I know is I'm not African, and some of y'all are going to do your genealogy, and you're going to find out, you dig deep enough, you're going to find out, yes, you are African. Sorry, and hate to bust your bubble. Okay? I hate to bust your bubble, but I got to kick it to you raw. All right? And some of you may not be, but I guarantee it's going to be a whole lot of you that are, or at least part. I've been in this thing too long, man. I've been in this thing a long time. Okay? And I've heard some of the most staunch pro-Aboriginal this, anti-African that, talk all that trash. And I run into them years later. They say, are they? And, they say, oh, yeah, I'm, I'm Seminole, and I'm, I'm a little bit of Shoshone. And then they say, there's some African in there, too. I found out there's some African in there. And I'm in my mind, I'm like, you talking all this trash before, about Africa and this, that, and the other. Come to find out you got some Africans in your closet. Okay? So like I said, until you've been in this for at least 30 years, okay? And again, I'm born knowing my lineage. I'm born knowing what tribes I am, okay? A lot of you are not. Some of y'all are just discovering that you have some indigenous ancestry, okay? I grew up knowing it, okay? And I grew up knowing my tribes, okay? Getting a little older, I've discovered additional tribes that we were not aware of. Okay. So like I said, okay, I've been walking this road in terms of doing research, and practicing the culture and stuff like that. Okay, I've been walking this road, before a lot of you were even born. Okay, I've been researching for nearly 40 years. Okay, some of y'all ain't even 40 years old. Okay, let alone been researching that long. Okay, so if your sole motivation is to say that you're not African, you have the wrong motivation. You're trying to push a narrative. That's what you're trying to do. Okay? And also, it sounds like you have a complex. If your sole motivation is just to say that you're not African, somebody got my spot, you mother. Hold on, I gotta find a parking spot. Let's see. Let me do this here. Give me a second, y'all. Going to get me some lunch. And I'm looking for a parking spot. I'm gonna park illegally here because I'm just dashing in. and dashing out. Okay. But like I said, if your sole motivation is to say that you're not African, it sounds like you have a complex. Okay. When your sole motivation should be to find out where your ancestors come from. Okay. To find out where your ancestors come from. And what you are, whether that be indigenous American or whether that be African, Caribbean, European, whatever. Your sole motivation should be to be proud of where you come from. Okay. Oh, I see we have Ninky, my timekeeper, in here in the house. Hey, Ninky. Hey, timekeeper. How's it going? Yeah. So, yeah, like I say, that should be your sole motivation, to find out where you come from. Hold on. I think I found a better parking. Oh, I think I'm too slow. Wait a minute. Oh, look like somebody else is coming out. Let's see. Yeah, this guy's coming out. Oh, that other person's not getting that spot. Just give me a second. Oh. First and foremost, before I do anything, I gotta find me a parking spot. Because I'm parked at a hydrant now, and I ain't trying to get no ticket. Alright, here we go. Alright, now we good. Better, should I say. Alright, good. So, you should be trying to tribe up or, find your ancestry, connect yourself to a tribe, even if it's an African tribe, if that's where your ancestors come from, rep that, be proud of that, If your thing is you just don't want to be African, you have a complex, and you don't know history, because some of y'all sound just like, you're brainwashed, you don't know history. Africa doesn't have a slouch history, so you grew up, watching Tarzan and stuff like that, and, you feel that that's the history and that's the culture over there, but, that's not the case, And if your ancestry is indigenous, and connected to the tribes here, be proud of that, rep that, And if you have both ancestries, be proud of both, rep both. You should, when you're doing your research, you should be open to whatever. It should be, you should be having an open mind. If you're doing your genealogy from a biased perspective, or you're doing research from a biased perspective, research in general, you're not going to be a good researcher. And if you're doing,
your genealogy from a biased perspective, you're not going to be very effective. You know, you're searching in vain. You know, you should just be looking to see where your ancestry lies. Okay, and it takes work. Okay, and you Pan Africanists, you know, you're another piece of work. Okay, and I look at a lot of, you know, not only do I have a lot of you in my chats and in comment sections, but, you know, I listen to some of your content, you know, quite a bit of it actually, you know. And when I say Pan Africanist, I'm not talking about real Africans born on the continent. I'm talking about these Negroes, these, you know, these Wafricans, you know, wannabe Africans, you know, the what Wafricans, you know, here in America, you know, who anytime we talk about our indigenous heritage, you got to put your mouth on it. Okay, mind your business. If you don't want to be indigenous, or you are ashamed of your indigenous ancestry, or you think that your uh, grandparents were lying, then don't watch our content. Go somewhere else. Okay, poke your nose out of our business. Okay, because we know who we are. Okay, we know our heritage. We're not asking, we're telling. Not only do we have, and I can only speak for myself, you know, not only do we have genealogy, but we have DNA to prove it. Okay, we have the DNA and we have the genealogy. Okay, and you Pan Africanists, you don't have genealogy to prove that you're African. You don't have it. And you don't have any grandparents or great grandparents or anybody in your family who said that they were African or who came from Africa. For the most part. Not everyone. Okay. Because again, yes, there were Africans that came over here. Okay. So I'm not talking about the ones who genuinely have that ancestry and know it. I'm talking about the average Negro running around here talking about they're Pan-Africanist. Okay. They don't have genealogy. All they have is a DNA test that they took with the DNA company. And realistically, to be totally honest with you, that's lazy research. It's lazy. It's a cop-out. Okay, because most of you admit that your forebears said they came from indigenous tribes, but you, with your piece of paper from the white man who've been deducated in their schools, believe that your forebears were lying, your grandparents were lying, they were making it up. And I see the numbers dwindling now. Okay, that shows me that, you know, I'm stepping on toes with the Wafricans the numbers are down to zero now. Good. Get out of here. Get out of here. I told you. That's what I said. You know, if you're on the channel spying, you know, get out of here. You know, if you don't believe that in what where we're coming from with our genealogy and who we say we are as indigenous people, get out of here. That's why the numbers are dropping. Get on out of here. Damn it. Okay. So, yeah, it's lazy research. You guys don't want to do any genealogical research. All you want to do is take a DNA test and talk about, oh, yeah, I'm Yoruba. Look here. This my DNA results. It say I is Yorubas. My massa told me I is a Yoruba. I'm Ghanaian. Look here, I is from Ghana. Oh, look here. It say here, I am 90% Sierra Leoneans. But ask them for some genealogy, linking them to those places, and they can't do it. Okay, they can't do it. Anyway, since the numbers have dropped to zero, well, now it's to 1. Okay, since everybody's dropping off, I'm dropping off too, because my lunch break is up and I got to get back to work. And for those who don't like what I'm saying, okay, just in case there's kids watching, I'm not going to put it all the way up. I'm just going to put it a half up, okay, to you, all right, because we're going to tell our story regardless of who likes it, okay, and we're bringing you the information to prove it, okay. Again, on this channel here, we're about doing the work, okay. We're not sitting up here talking about, oh yeah, the Mongoloids this and the Mongoloids that. Like I said before, let's get another conversation going. All right, please. We know the history. We know who we are and this, that, and the other. Okay, all of those arguments and stuff like that about who the definition of American, all of that stuff, copper color, this and that and the other, we dealt with that decades ago. Y'all are just discovering that conversation. We've moved on at this channel. We've moved on from all of that, and we never initiated any of those debates. Okay, people were questioning our indigeneity and we were defending it. Okay, we never launched an attack on anyone from any reservation or any phenotype or anything like that. Okay, the attacks came this way and we defended it ferociously. Okay, and we are the pioneers in this who made it so that certain conversations are dead now. Okay, certain things that are common knowledge with regards to our indigeneity, is accepted now. We were at the forefront of a lot of this stuff. So, but this we dealt with that. A lot of y'all who are just discovering those discussions, go to one of the new channels, and y'all deal with that. Go to some of the new channels that y'all keep, telling me I need to watch. Again, I don't need to watch anyone's channel. Okay, we've been doing this before any of those channels. Okay, long before any of those channels ever existed. Okay, we were having those conversations before some of them were even born. Okay, so over here we do the work. Okay, over here we're doing genealogy. We're helping people find their ancestors and things of that nature. Okay, so again, all right, I'm out of here. The numbers are dwindling. Okay, y'all don't want to hear what I gotta say. Too bad. You know, I'm gonna stand on what I'm saying. So until the next time, Dodada Gahan E. Sarame. Ayo. And for y'all who don't know, that's not one language. I was just speaking. Those are two separate separate uh, individual languages, indigenous languages that I was closing out with. Okay. Anyway, later.